Every animal on Earth avoids discomfort. They move away from pain, hunger, cold. Evolution spent millions of years making sure of it. But somewhere in human history, something went wrong. We developed the ability to sit in a perfectly safe, perfectly comfortable room with food, warmth, and no threats of any kind, and feel absolutely miserable. No other animal can do this. Scientists have a name for it, and the fact that you can feel it might be the strangest thing about being human. The name is boredom, and before you dismiss it as a minor inconvenience, consider this. A study that followed 7,500 civil servants in London for 25 years found that people who reported high levels of boredom were 37% more likely to have died by the end of the study. Not from boredom directly, from heart disease, from accidents, from causes that had nothing to do with boredom on paper. But the correlation was undeniable. Boredom is not a mood. It is a condition, and understanding where it came from changes everything about how you see the human mind. To understand boredom, you first have to understand what it is not. It is not laziness. It is not tiredness. It is not sadness. Neuroscientists define boredom as a specific mental state characterized by low arousal, high dissatisfaction, and an urgent desire for something, anything, to engage with, combined with an inability to find it. Your brain is not switched off when you are bored. It is running at full power with nowhere to point that power. It is an engine revving in neutral, and that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because here is the first strange thing. Boredom requires a remarkably sophisticated brain to exist at all. A rat placed in an empty cage does not get bored in the way you do. It explores, then it stops. Its nervous system settles, it waits. The waiting is not painful. It is simply waiting. The rat has no concept of time passing, no awareness that it could be doing something else, no internal narrator telling it that this moment is empty and wrong. It just exists inside the moment it is in. You cannot do that. And the reason you cannot is the same reason you can read, plan, regret, imagine, and grieve. You have a prefrontal cortex that almost nothing else on Earth has in this form. That structure, sitting just behind your forehead, is what gives you the ability to think about the future, to simulate possibilities, to hold an image of what your life could be, and compare it to what it actually is right now. Every time those two things don't match, your brain generates a signal. A pressure, a restlessness. That signal is boredom. It is your prefrontal cortex telling you that the current moment is not enough. In other words, boredom is the price of imagination, and you pay it every single day. But when did this start? When did humans first begin to feel this particular kind of pain? Anthropologists believe the answer is tied directly to the emergence of what they call behavioral modernity, the point roughly 70,000 to 100,000 years ago when humans suddenly began doing things no animal had ever done, carving symbols into stone, burying their dead with objects, making jewelry from shells found hundreds of miles from where they lived, creating art on cave walls in total darkness, using lamps made from animal fat, painting scenes they would never show to anyone. Something shifted in the human brain around this period. Researchers call it the cognitive revolution. And one of the things that shifted was the capacity to experience time not as a series of immediate moments, but as a continuous story. Past, present, and future wired together into a single narrative. And once your brain could do that, once it could hold a model of what was possible and measure the present against it, boredom became inevitable. Because now there was always something else you could be doing. There was always somewhere else you could be. There was always a version of this moment that was richer, more meaningful, more alive than the one you were actually living. Your ancestors sitting in a cave 80,000 years ago, waiting out a rainstorm with nothing to do, were almost certainly the first creatures on Earth to feel the specific ache of a moment going to waste. And what did they do with that ache? They made things. The oldest known musical instrument is a flute carved from a vulture bone, found in a cave in Germany, dated to roughly 40,000 years ago. Somebody took a bone, spent hours hollowing it out with stone tools, calculated the spacing of the holes, and made something that had no survival value whatsoever. It could not feed you, it could not protect you, it would not keep you warm. It existed purely to turn an empty moment into something that felt like more than nothing. This is what boredom does. It is not a signal that something is wrong with you. It is a signal that your brain is looking for meaning. And when meaning is not supplied by the environment, humans create it themselves. Every song ever written, every story ever told, every painting, every invention, every religion began in a moment that felt empty and wrong. Boredom is not the opposite of creativity, it is the engine of it. But here is where it gets complicated. Modern neuroscience has discovered something about boredom that no one expected. When your brain enters a state of low external stimulation, it does not go quiet. A specific network of regions lights up instead. Scientists call it the default mode network. And what it does is extraordinary. It runs simulations, it replays memories, it imagines future scenarios, it wanders through every unresolved problem in your life and turns them over, looking for angles you missed. It is the most creative state your brain enters, and it only activates when you are doing nothing. In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia ran an experiment. They put participants alone in a room with no phone, no book, no distraction of any kind. Their one option was a button that delivered a mild electric shock to their own leg. Most people had said beforehand that they would pay money to avoid being shocked. But left alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes, 67% of men and 25% of women chose to shock themselves, rather than sit quietly with nothing happening. They would rather cause themselves physical pain than be bored. And this tells you something devastating about what modern life has done to us. Because for most of human history, boredom was uncomfortable but manageable. You sat with it. You let it push you toward something. The default mode network did its work. Ideas formed, problems resolved. The restlessness eventually became action. But today, boredom lasts approximately 8 seconds. The moment your brain dips below its stimulation threshold, your hand moves to your phone. Your thumb is already scrolling before you have consciously decided to do anything. You never reach the point where boredom tips into creativity. You never let the default mode network run. You short-circuit the entire process with a feed that has been algorithmically engineered to keep your attention precisely at the edge of engagement. Never satisfied, never bored, never fully alive. Psychologist Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying the conditions under which people reported feeling most alive. His conclusion was that the peak human experience, what he called flow, occurs when challenge and skill are perfectly matched. When you are doing something hard enough to require your full attention, but not so hard that it breaks you. That state of total absorption, time disappearing, self disappearing, pure presence is what boredom is trying to push you toward. It is the discomfort before the breakthrough, the pressure before the release. Every time you pick up your phone to escape it, you are choosing the numbness of constant stimulation over the possibility of something real. Your ancestors did not have that option. They had to sit with the emptiness until something came out of it. And what came out was music and stories and paintings on cave walls and eventually mathematics and philosophy and science and every other thing that defines what we are. Boredom is the oldest human feeling that has no animal equivalent. It is the gap between what is and what could be made painful enough that you have to do something about it. It is your brain's way of telling you that you were built for more than this moment. The question is whether you are still willing to feel it, because the capacity is still there. The default mode network still activates the moment stimulation drops. The creative engine is still running, but for the first time in human history, we have built an environment so relentlessly stimulating that most people never let it fire. And somewhere in that fact is something worth sitting with, even if sitting with things is the one skill we are most rapidly losing.